yesterday's decision by a U.S. District Court concerning Spruce Number 1 mine. Let me give you the quick background here. It takes a minute. But this is a huge decision concerning coal mining in West Virginia, and particularly mountaintop removal mining. Okay, follow me here for just a minute. In 2007, the Army Corps of Engineers, which has jurisdiction over the waterways, issued a permit for the Spruce Number 1 mine. Then, 4 years later, the EPA came in and said, okay, we know that you issue the permits, but we're going to prohibit the discharge into nearby streams, which essentially blocked the mine from moving ahead. There was an appeal of that by the mine operator, said, wait a minute, we got the permits, the EPA can't step in now. And initially, the federal court sided with them. A judge wrote, Judge Amy Berman wrote that the court, that the EPA engaged in magical thinking by believing it could come in after the permit had been issued and essentially remove that permit. Then the EPA appealed. And then yesterday, U.S. District Court out of Washington, D.C., ruled in favor of the EPA. And the court said that the EPA has this backstop authority, that it can come in at any time. The EPA can come in at any time after the permits have been issued and essentially overrule that. So it's a huge decision in favor of those who want to stop mountaintop removal mining and a huge setback for those who want to have mountaintop removal mining. Jason Bostic is vice president of the West Virginia Coal Association. He joins us on Metro News Talkline. Do you agree or disagree with my assessment?
Well, Hoppy, I think you did a very good very good background on the history of the spruce permit and your assessment that this is a huge decision. The only thing, Hoppy, I would disagree with you on just a little bit is this is not about surface coal mining, and it's certainly not about mountaintop removal mining. 404 permits in the coal industry are required for virtually everything we do, from the construction of haul roads to underground mine face-ups to preparation plants. And even broader than us, Hoppy, any activity across this country that has to have a 404 permit. I think any of those industrial activities are placed in peril, if you will, by this decision that gives EPA this unfettered authority to come in at any time and yank a permit that was validly issued by the Corps.
The 404 is a water quality permit, right? Discharge permit?
Discharge of dredged or fill material.
Okay.
It's for in-stream construction activities.
Yeah, for discharge material. You're going to displace stuff. So what happens with that stuff, right? That's the okay. So you're saying it doesn't just affect spruce and goes beyond mountaintop removal mining. It goes to all mining and certain kinds of even construction.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The local Walmart, Hoppy, that needs to put a culvert in the creek to build a road crossing. The gas line that needs to cross the creek. Anything, again, any in-stream activity relative to construction has to have a 404 authorization from the Corps.
Look, everybody knows where I am on this. I mean, mountaintop removal mining is not my favorite mining activity. It does take the tops off mountains to get to small seams of coal, but I think there is a larger issue here, and that is the way Congress designed this whole process was that the decision was up to the Army Corps of Engineers to issue these permits. But if you have a situation where the EPA, unless I'm reading this wrong, the EPA can come in at any time, which is the language in the court's decision, at any time and take action that essentially doesn't exactly revoke the permit, but it says you can't discharge here. It has the effect of withdrawing the permit or blocking the permit. If the EPA can come in at any time after the permits have been issued, what is a coal mine operator supposed to do? Because they can get trumped at any moment. That's my read.
You're exactly right, Hoppy. And like any other capital-intensive industrial or commercial activity, the coal industry craves stability in its permitting process. And this decision turns that process on its head. Instead of a permit being a license and a contract with the government to work and do your permitted activity, the permit now becomes only the ability to work as long as you're in the good political graces of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. And that's a very precarious place to be.
Now, you say in the good political graces. I'm sure those on the environmental side would say as long as you're meeting the environmental standard, because the court decision does say that the EPA steps in when there's I don't have the language in front of me. Says
unacceptable adverse effect.
Yes, unacceptable adverse effect. So Could there be, and in deference to the EPA, could there be a point when mining's going on and the EPA comes in and says, well, now you're doing something that is polluting more than we expected, therefore we're going to stop what's going on?
Sure, I think that's conceivable, but I think I would raise 2 points there. First, relative to unacceptable adverse effect. Hoppy, what we've seen since this administration took office is EPA interpreting that term very broadly and hijacking the interpretation of other environmental regulatory statutes like the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act and the other provisions of the Clean Water Act, those that are left to the states to implement. EPA hijacked the interpretation of those particular statutes and imposed their view, their political view in my mind, of what unacceptable adverse effect meant.
Mm-hmm. Jason,
more specifically, Hoppy, to the Corps of Engineers, the way I think Congress intended this to work was for the EPA to have the right to veto the permit before it was activated. And I think if you look at the regulations and the processes surrounding the Corps' approval, those are very complicated process called 404Q, where decisions that EPA may have a problem with for the Corps are elevated at proceedingly higher levels between the leadership of the Corps and the leadership of the EPA to try to resolve those issues. And this decision, I think, from the appeals court nullifies that very complicated process that's supposed to occur before the Corps actually signs and stamps the permit.
Jason Bostic is with us, Vice President, Coal Association, on this court decision yesterday concerning most of the focus is on spruce number 1 mountaintop removal mining. Jason says it applies to mining in general and other large projects where large amounts of dirt and debris and rocks are moved. Is it getting to the point, in spruce number 1, there's been a little bit of mining there, but spruce number 1, this permitting process, it goes back to like 1999 or 1998 for what would have been the largest surface mine, the largest mountaintop removal mine in history, I believe. Is it getting to the point, now we're at 2013, and you get a decision, a negative decision from the court concerning whether this can go forward? Is it getting to the point where the coal industry is just going to say, for mountaintop removal mining in particular, it just isn't worth it? Why even go down the mountaintop removal mining road if I'm going to hear it from environmentalists? 2, I'm going to have to fight. I'm going to have a 10-year permitting process. And 3, the EPA could trump me at any time. Has it gotten to the point where it just doesn't make sense anymore?
Well, I mean, it certainly made investment decisions by coal companies that operate in multiple coal basins across this country, and some that even operate internationally. It's made it very difficult for them to justify, I think, investment in West Virginia and Appalachia. But again, Hoppy, it's more than mountaintop mining. This is industry-wide. And, again, you're subject to the political whims of the federal EPA. So if they wake up tomorrow and decide that underground coal refuse disposal areas are a bad thing, then you could potentially lose millions of tons of underground production at a single complex because those facilities require Corps permits as well.
What do you say to the environmental, the environmentalists and some community leaders who really object to mountaintop removal mining? Here's Emma Chus, C-H-E-U-S-E. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. She says, communities in Appalachia can finally breathe a sigh of relief knowing that EPA always has the final say to stop devastating permits. And I heard from another environmentalist this morning who said, look, it is the Environmental Protection Agency. Don't they have an obligation to protect the environment? Therefore, they should have veto power over these big projects.
Well, Javi, the first thing I would say is, the communities across Appalachia and across southern West Virginia where this type of mining occurs and where all mining occurs here in West Virginia, they're not really concerned about EPA's authority to veto a permit. What they're concerned about are the mining operations and the jobs and the taxes that it supports. Javi, it's very interesting that people that proclaim to speak for the people of southern West Virginia and central Appalachia and protecting these communities, they don't seem to understand that these communities are here because of coal. Coal was the fabric, if you will, of Appalachia. And without coal, you lose that social fabric. If coal goes away, these communities will dry up, and southern West Virginia and potentially the whole state of West Virginia will suffer enormously. So to that particular quote, the people of Appalachia are not worried about EPA's authority. What they're worried about is the ability of a mining operator to make investment and to employ people in a stable way with good wages and good benefits for as long as they possibly can.
Jason Bostic, Vice President, West Virginia Coal Association. Jason, thank you for coming on. It's good to speak with you. I appreciate it.